This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 341 for Thursday, December 5th, 2019. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. And it has been exactly 40 episodes since my friend Stephen Sharkey-Chouinard has been on the show. Stephen is back to talk about The Dragon Prince Season 3. We have finished it, and we are itching to talk about it. But you can find more from Stephen at webtoon.bigsaltypond.com. This is new. He's going to tell you all about it. As well as Stephen ESC on Twitter. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic. I'm excited to talk about cartoons with you.
Yeah, me too. Like grown-ups usually do.
Well, and this is the thing. I was talking to my mom the other day. She was by to drop off some groceries and stuff. Sometimes my parents go to like Costco and they get like the big things, and I'll just say, "Hey, can you pick me up like a giant thing of chicken and I'll just pay you back," rather than like me having to go with them and all this kind of stuff. And so in the process of her coming by and dropping that off, she was teasing me about the ideas email that both her and my parents were separated. So I got two separate emails asking, separated, they're divorced and long since remarried. But what I'm saying is I got two emails asking like, "Hey, we don't know what to get you for Christmas. What have you been up to? Like, we don't want a Christmas list, but we're in the dark here. What kind of things could you use around the apartment," or all that kind of stuff. And so I send them some ideas, but some of the ideas are like art books or comic things, or, art of books and things, or, practical things like, cookware, things like that. And so apparently Mom and my sister were joking about my list, saying that it covers all ages 4 to 40. I was just, hey, I didn't ask for Lego, just FYI. I left that off the list. It's not like it's not there in my head. It's just not on the list of stuff.
Your mom gets the list. This is the same one he sent me when he was 12.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a list. It's more like, I don't live with my parents anymore, obviously. And I see them a fair amount, but we don't necessarily talk about like gift stuff. So it's really hard for them to kind of figure out, well, what do you get them? And it's equally as difficult for my sister and I. And I'll ask you, because we have this problem, and Andrea and I commiserate over it. Whenever we ask our parents what they want for Christmas, they never want anything.
Exactly.
We don't want anything. We don't need anything from you. It's like, that is not what I asked. It's akin to me asking Mom if she wants tea or coffee from the kitchen and her shouting back yes from the living room. Yeah. It is not helpful, right?
No.
And because I don't spend as much time with them as I used to, and I don't know what they're into or what they might need, or like whether someone's coat has got a hole in it, or Barry lost his gloves, or like, I just need to know that kind of stuff so that I can figure it out. Dad and Phyllis are always happy with a bottle of wine, but like that doesn't seem very thoughtful to me,
Yeah, but at the same time, it's we have this. We go through this with our kids and birthdays and Christmas and stuff, where it doesn't feel right to get a gift card as a gift.
Yeah.
But when they're saving up for something, and if you go out of your way to try to get something that's not the gift card they asked for, it's almost.
Mm-hmm.
I've run into situations where it almost feels less thoughtful.
Yes.
Trying to get the thoughtful gift because it's neither something they neither wanted nor really needed at that time.
Well, yeah, and that's different though. Like with gift cards and kids that are like saving up for like a game console or a new video game or something like that, you can tell the grandparents or whatever that's what they're looking for, and then they can put it in a card with a note to say like, this is to go towards your super thing that you want. And that kind of stuff, I think, is thoughtful. And I did that with my sister and her husband when I gave them a wedding gift. I couldn't get it in time for their wedding, but it arrived shortly thereafter, which was nice because I got to give it to them like 2 weeks later, when it was just us, as opposed to like at the wedding when they're opening up all kinds of stuff after, that sort of thing. So it was nicer. But it was a gift card to a very fancy golf resort in Cape Breton. I can't afford to send the both of them on grief fees because it was a lot of money. But the course offers gift cards. which I thought
Nice.
was great. And because I don't think Andrea listens to this podcast anymore, I can say that both my parents know about it obviously now, and they've sort of thought to themselves, both Andrea and Nick have birthdays at the beginning of summer, kind of entry into golf season, and they have they have a small, oh, it's small, not small, they have a decent chunk out of this golf resort vacation. So if other parties wanted to give them birthday gifts that all went towards this one thing, that equals a really nice getaway for them, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
summer. And so when I told my parents about it, they were like, "Oh, mental note. Like, how hard was that?" It's like not hard at all. I emailed the website and they sent me stuff in the mail, and it was fine.
Nice.
It's Nova Scotia. Like it doesn't even leave the country. It's just like it's just regular post. It's just an envelope with a gift card in it. No different than like a gift card for the Gap or whatever. So that way, it's something that everyone can contribute, and then ultimately no one, because I mean, my parents are retired. They have a fixed income. They can't necessarily spend huge buckets of money to send kids on vacations for gifts, but it's a nice way to kind of contribute it thoughtfully because it's something that both Andrea and Nick really enjoy. Plus, it's like a getaway. It's out of the city. Kaylee would go to her mom's for the weekend, and so it would all just kind of like equal a nice gesture, time spent together as opposed to like a thing, which they don't like.
Yeah,
I don't want to
exactly.
buy them a thing they don't need, sort of thing. So
Yeah, I think it's just sort of a mental thing for me. It's tough buying somebody a gift card because it doesn't feel personal, even though it's what they need.
mm-hmm.
And even then when they're saving up for a bigger thing, it almost feels like even though it's helping them get what they want, I guess it's just me with the mental. It feels like I'm giving them a partial gift or
Yeah,
something like that sometimes, but
yeah,
in the end, as you said, it gives everyone the opportunity to pitch in and give one huge gift
yeah.
that will be really well received.
Yeah. I know that Peyton and Lee, Peyton, who helped me start this podcast like 8 years ago,
Mm.
he they stopped doing inter-family gifts. They obviously they dote on their son. They don't overdo it, but Ewan gets a lovely Christmas. But like Peyton and Lee and her sister, her parents. I don't know whether Peyton's parents are in on it as well because they're out of the province. But basically, everybody that's local, like aunts and uncles and grandparents that are local here in the city, instead of buying each other stuff, they just take the money that they would normally spend on one another and they end up buying like a full Christmas kit for like a family in need, which I thought was a really cool idea. So that it's like
Nice, nice.
turkey, groceries, like the fixings for dinner, plus gifts for kids under the tree and stuff that maybe a single mom that's working two jobs and has three kids or whatever that can't afford that kind of thing. And I don't
Yeah,
remember what organization they go through, but it's all like there's names and stuff, and you get paired up with a family and what's kids clothing sizes or whatever, and so they put together this big like box, this gift box, and they it ends up going towards a family, and they've been doing that for a number of years now, I think.
that's a really great idea.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I'd love to be in a position to do that. I remember speaking with Johnny, my co-host on Spawn Chunks, and him and his wife are in a position now that they've kind of like moved into a home, and they're starting to like check all the boxes. And
Hmm.
he was saying at one point, I'm not sure whether he was on this podcast or whether it was just he and I talking off mic before the Spawn Chunks, but he was saying that they really enjoy now being in a position where they can do more charity work. He can do like a charity Twitch stream, or he can, because they teamed up and did a charity Twitch stream for some organizations in the U.S. because his wife is from the U.S. And
Nice.
then he's also made some donations around the holidays around England and for organizations that he feels passionate about, and how nice it is to be in a position as an adult to start to do that, because when you're in your because I mean he's a little bit younger than us, but when you're in your early and even late 20s, sometimes you don't always have the available income to do that kind of stuff. Like sometimes
Yeah.
it's more inward focused, but yeah, it's that time of year, and I'm looking forward to doing some more charity stream work if I can in the future. I'm going to try to do that in 2020. Plan ahead a little bit more and say like, okay, Extra Life is in the fall, and there may or may not be some other local things around streaming here in the springtime. Springtime is usually a big fundraising season. I find like April, May, there tends to be, you know, whether it's breast cancer awareness month or like stuff like that.
Right.
I've done that before with some of my comic strips. I donated a, a comic strip to, or I auctioned off. I can't remember exactly how it went. I think I donated the strip That's been a long time, but it was a comic strip about Bras Across the Bridge, which is a local Halifax event that raises money for breast cancer awareness. And the local radio station auctioned it off. And it was, I got to, it was announced on the radio, and it was kind of a little fun little PR exchange for me. But then, of course, somebody walked home with the original artwork for the strip, which was cool.
Yeah, very nice.
If I'm remembering correctly, I'm pretty sure Mia Farrow bought it. I'm pretty sure that's who ended up with it, which is really cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Speaking of comic strips, you have a new comic strip on the web. What
I do.
Yeah. So this is exciting because I don't have time to draw mine anymore, but you certainly have time to draw yours. So what is Big Salty Pond, and where can people find it?
Well, Big Salty Pond is it's funny because at work there was a woman I was joking with one time, and it actually the conversation started. Somebody was talking about Ms. Marvel, the comic book, and so I kind of got into the conversation a little bit. And I thought, just saying that I really liked it, and I love the fact that Ms. Marvel was a young Muslim woman. I thought that was great, and my sons read it, and I felt that it was important for them to read because as a Caucasian family, we don't really, there's no racial barriers in front of us. It's just the reality of it. So I felt it was important for my sons to read this, and so they can just sort of see, what other people have to deal with. And in the conversation, I said, me being a white guy, and because Sharky's in my last name, like this colleague said, "Wait, Sharky, you're a white guy? Oh my goodness, you're a great white shark." And then the joke sort of went from there, and then we just had some banter back and forth, and we were just laughing. And then she said, "I would love to read a webcomic about you. You can draw. You should do a webcomic about that." And so I was originally just going to do a sort of a 6-panel one-off to capture the joke that we did. And then the more that I sort of fine-tuned the wording, my brain went, "Oh, this would be funny if it went down that route. Oh, this would be funny too. Oh, that's an interesting idea." And then eventually I had sort of 8 loose ideas jotted down on this list, and I was going, all right, well, that's interesting. So I just decided to sort of create it and put it up on Instagram. And that's all I was going to do, is do it up on Instagram and just share it with her to see, basically just as a share thing. And then I told Megan about it, our friend Megan, who's usually on the podcast with you.
Yes. Yep.
And she said, "Oh, you should put that on Webtoons." And I said, "Well, what's that?" She goes, "It is a platform for webcomics. Anytime anybody tells me they're doing a webcomic, you should put it on. I tell them to put it on there. So you should definitely put it on there as well." And I went, all right, sure, why not? And at the time, I had the ideas, but I didn't really think of doing anything with it. And it actually originally wanted to do it for the joke, and then I decided to continue doing it because I've sort of felt like I've fallen out of drawing. I don't do it as often as I like.
Mm-hmm.
And then idea after idea, and then I drew them and I posted them. And then, now it's something that I've got trying to get done at least once a month, ideally twice. And then I've set up a Patreon page for it as well. So it's patreon.com/BigSaltyPond, just, in case anyone wanted to support it. And if it makes any money, I'm going to continue doing it for fun regardless. But if it makes any money and becomes something that's got a sort of a viable side income as well, then I would love to be able to do one once a week and just sort of have that be my fun little part-time job. But
it's nice when creative stuff online can generate even just enough income to keep your butt in the chair. Like, not that it isn't fun, but ultimately some of these things end up being a little bit more work or a little bit more time. I mean, it's time is the big thing, right? Like, do you have the time that you can take to sit down and do that? And it's really cool, the tools that are available online, whether it's Webtoon for distribution and getting more eyeballs on it, and patreon.com to provide a platform, a trusted platform where people can support creative work. I mean, we have one for this podcast. I've got a couple other Patreons, for other creative projects that I do. And something I really like about it, which is not obviously, I guess, out there, is that creators get about 90% of the
right.
funds.
You did mention that before.
So the way that, because it's fresh in my mind, because Patreon the month just rounded over, and I'll get to this in a second. But the month just rounded over, which means that Patreon is charging all of the patrons of all of your creative endeavors, and all that stuff is happening. And I just kind of was reminded that, when I'm doing my bookkeeping for the month, that, when, let's say someone is supporting you at $10, well,
Right.
there is a Patreon fee, which is how Patreon stays in business. And then there's a credit card or a payment processing fee. And that is just like, it's a separate entity, whether it's a company or whatever that processes either credit cards or PayPal or whatever. There's a fee associated with that. But out of that $10, you'd see like $9.10. Like the two fees are roughly 45 cents a piece. One a bit for Patreon, about 5%, and then a bit for the credit card processing, which is just a fee of operational costs. A lot of other platforms out there, the cut is much larger, and we won't get into the details. But for Patreon itself to only take 5, and then for now, I say that I've been on Patreon for a very long time,
Right.
so I'm grandfathered into one of their plans. But there are various plans that you can be on with Patreon.
Right. I think mine's actually. I'd have to check. I think the tiers are now 8% and 12%.
Right. So it might.
And I think mine defaults to 12. I think it defaults to 12 because I think that's what I'm on, and I haven't changed anything.
Right.
So I need to kind of go in and check to see what.
Yeah. But the
benefits are from the different.
But that 12, I don't think is 12 to Patreon. I think that's the 12 total. Like it's the 12 total between the credit card processing fees, unless it's on top of it. It might be on top of it. Either way, anything less than 20 is still still really good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still really good. So it's an excellent way to support creators is ultimately what I'm trying to get at. But in terms of Big Salty Pond, what's the content? Like when people are going to go to Webtoons and read this, like what should they expect?
It's just sort of a pretty lighthearted comic. It started off as just 6 panels, square format to work on Instagram, and then the last couple of them, I guess, and they continued along that format for a while. But the last couple of them, they didn't present as well on Webtoons, and thankfully it was just I think it was after the 6th or 7th comic that I'd done. It was after the 6th, and then I got featured on Webtoons' main page, and so it's funny because I had checked Webtoons earlier that day or the previous day or whatever, and I think I had 9 subscribers or something like that, and again I was just doing it for fun, and I was just checking it out, and my son goes, "How many subscribers do you have again, Daddy?" And I said, "I've got 9." He goes, "Oh, okay." But he didn't say anything else. But then I happened to check it later that night, and I had I forget now, 654 or something weird like that. So within a day of me checking and having 9, and then suddenly out of the blue having 600 and something, I had no idea that I'd been featured or anything like that. And so then over the course of the next week, the number just continued to climb. And so I've read different articles online, and it seems like if you can put together, I guess to answer your question, Big Salty Pond, it's basically the little snippet of text I have describing it is it's underwater shenanigans in the small corner of the Great Big Sea, and the whole idea was I just sort of wanted to have a couple of friends, started off as 2 sharks, just bantering back and forth with each other, and then including maybe some other characters going forward. But it was just, instead of it being this wide open ocean, so the idea of a big salty pond is the idea of the big ocean. But again, the salty pond, the idea of a pond is small. So just to have talking about, I guess, their own personal little corner of the sea. But yeah, for the first little bit, it's just sort of bantering back and forth with each other, playing off the idea of the great white shark and being on brand as a great white shark, and
right. So that more character driven stuff than any kind of larger storyline, more gag day to day sort of stuff.
Exactly. If anyone were to check it out, I'd suggest going back to the first one because they do sort of link together. There's a mini narrative. There's not a tale going on, but they all sort of start off with something about the previous story. A little while ago, I got the Charles Schulz, one of the volumes of work for Charles Schulz. It was 2 years of his work. And one
Wow.
of the things, and I've always loved his stuff, and it was one of the things that I noticed is that he would sort of have this sometimes 6 comic strips in a row, and a lot of them do that, I guess, but 6 comic strips in a row where there's 4 panels or 5 panels, and there's a mini gag in there. Not hilarious, but a mini gag.
Yeah.
And then the next strip of 6 for the following day would sort of start with referencing the end of the previous one, and if it was worthwhile keeping the joke going, then there'd be another 4 panels of that little story or joke going. So then usually every 6 strips or maybe even more or less, there would be it sort of have a scene change. So it'd be a scene with Charlie Brown and other characters and stuff in it. And I just sort of like that format. And it was really nice to get that from the library because I was reminded of how much I admired Charles Schulz in terms of what he does. So I guess reading that as well sort of fueled me to continue to do this. Now there's eight issues up. There's a ninth one coming out on Monday, and yeah, just I guess interestingly enough that we're talking about it and on the podcast today, but I got featured again today.
Oh, nice.
So 2 comics later, I got featured on the main page again today, and it's pretty great. I actually had fire off Megan a quick message to say thank you again for recommending this because it's doing quite well. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
that web address for people again is webtoons.bigsaltypond.com, and I'll have that linked in the show notes. And with permission from Stephen, maybe even one of the comics to kind of give a quick read so people can just read that and then click on through and read the rest over at Webtoons. That's great, man. I wish I had more time for comics. I had to kind of let Starcrossed dribble off and stop because the amount of time that it took to do it and the amount of income I could generate with it just wasn't sustainable. But I was just a little bit ahead. I started my webcomic in this weird part of like webcomics were everywhere. So you were in this sea of everybody and their dog had a webcomic. And then it was before tools like Webtoons. It was before the real push was get your stuff seen on social media. It was all about driving people to your website.
Yeah.
And so that limited things. There was a lot of back end that went into it. But then also Patreon didn't come along until very close to the end when I started to get busy with other things. And thankfully I had enough strips to put together a book in 2012, but I found it very difficult to maintain the strip past that. And I'm glad to see, something new like Big Salty Pond, especially from someone where it's like your first webcomic. Like it's not like you're a seasoned, this is your 5th webcomic sort of situation.
Yes.
Like it's nice to see good things happen to creative people, but also fun to watch this first experience of having a webcomic with someone. Because I remember what that experience was like for me back in like 2009 when I started Starcrossed. And I remember that feeling of like, people are reading it, people are commenting, people like you're being featured on, this, that, and the other thing. So that's a really, really cool experience. So, I mean, obviously you and I have talked obviously off mic about it. But I'm wishing you all the best on it, man. Like it's a fun little comic. And it's just nice that it's so like mobile friendly. It's really an easy thing to just pick up and read. And it's not like there's a huge, what's the word I'm looking for? Not learning curve. There's no hoops to jump through to read it on Webtoon. Like that's something that's nice about Webtoon. It makes it accessible.
Exactly, and actually, if anyone just wanted to read it on the sort of the platform of your choice, I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well at Big Salty Pond. So
nice.
All one word in both of those, yeah. And it's on Twitter as well, but the Twitter is I don't post it there because it doesn't present well, and that just usually links back to the Webtoon comic as well.
I have the same beef with Twitter and media and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I do a lot of the show art for podcasts, and I have to do 2 versions, usually a mobile friendly square version and then a 16:9 card version for YouTube. And like it all depends on where the show's going and all that kind of stuff. So it gets complicated quite quickly with how all of these different social media companies handle like images and media and promotion. Like it's tricky stuff, but looking forward to Shark Week in 2020 and seeing what happens with Big Salty
That's right.
Pond.
Yeah, see if we can get a plug that somehow during that week.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for me, I have been spending a little bit more time in No Man's Sky. I've been doing streams almost every other night maybe. It's tailing off a little bit, mostly because I just have adulting that I have to do and I can't play video games and stream every night of the week. But when I have done, it has been very, very fun. It's a very lean back experience, as I mentioned before. I am running into some bugs in the game. The synthesis update that came out in American Thanksgiving, um, it's updated some things and added some quality of life stuff that's good, but I'm finding some things very tricky. I find base construction and how different units snap to different units very confusing. There's different types of construction, and it doesn't feel like even though you can place them next to each other, they don't seem to be meant to go next to one another. And there's benefits and drawbacks to both, but it's a little bit unclear with some of the descriptions. I'm also getting a bug where in the build menu, you can only access blueprints that you've purchased, which makes sense. So you can go and look at the list at the big hub and say, oh, well, I only have unlocked, half of these metal construction parts. I'll have to keep an eye to see which one I want to unlock first. It's like a tech tree that you got to work through. But when you're trying to decide what to do, you're just looking at a small icon and you're trying to decide, okay, well, that is a storage container, or that is a piece of flooring or whatever, but you have no context as to how big it is. And one of the things that was really nice about the bug, where my inventory would show me all of the things that could be built, but they're all grayed out with the exceptions of the ones that I could actually build because I had the blueprints for, was that when you go through this build menu, it puts a hologram, because it's a sci-fi game, of what you're about to build in front of you.
Okay.
Which is really cool when you're like, oh, let's just check to see this landing pad. And you put the landing pad down and you think it's going to be, 1 or 2 spaces wide. No, it's like a 5x5 section. Like, it is a massive thing. And you're like, oh, okay. Mental note. This is a big thing. That's good to know. And so,
and you wouldn't get that information unless you were without the hologram.
No, the icon is just like, you have no idea how big it is. You look at your ship is big, but not that big. So you're like, well, it's a landing pad. How big does it have to be? Right. Well, it turns out pretty big. And same thing with other base parts. Like, I was looking at storage containers, and myself, being a heavy Minecraft player, was thinking chest. It's about half the size of the player. It's big and it's squat. It looks like a chest at the end of your bed. And so I was expecting chest. And so I said storage container, and this thing plops down the storage container, which is twice the size of a train car in front of me. And it's like, oh, so that takes up the living room.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, so stuff
I guess I'll put my bed right here.
Yeah, so exactly. So some of that kind of stuff was a little bit off-putting. And there's also things like prefab construction parts. So rather than building floors and walls and ceilings, you can just buy a cube and just plop it down. Comes ready made, just you have to add, a door to it. But they don't tell you that it doesn't come with doors, right? And so some of the metal plating, there's metal wall with door. Very obvious. You put, 4 sides down and then you put the door wall on one side. But with the prefab, it's just a prefab. So you're like, oh, it's a prefab. Obviously, a prefab would have a door. Nope. You have to buy the door separately. So sometimes it's like shopping at these places that want to nickel and dime you. And it's like, what? I just got back from the hub where I bought all this stuff, and you're telling me I got all the way home and there's no door. So stuff like that is a little bit problematic. Like, it takes you out of the science experience and the sci-fi experience of flying around from planet to planet. Now, the rest of the game is fine. These little bugs, like buttons, like hotkeys not working, certain switches for wiring in my base not working periodically, and then just working the next time that you load your base. Like, it's obviously some sort of script that just, like, when it loads in certain order, it works, and when it doesn't load in another order, it doesn't work. So it's not wholly broken. It's just a matter of like, well, this isn't working right now, but the next time I come to my base, it probably will. The only other thing that I find really off-putting about it is that the planets will regenerate the foliage that's on them, which is cool. It makes sense that trees would grow and all that kind of stuff. But after I've mowed down a tree to put a landing pad there, that same tree will grow in the exact same spot whenever the area refreshes and everything is quote unquote grown back, and it just grows straight up through the landing pad. And it's like, well,
even though you've put something down,
even though I put
on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the reverse is true of base building parts. If I put down a base plate and then put something on top of it, and then I have to remove that base plate to dig underneath it or do something, I can't put the base plate back down again until I remove the stuff on top of it because the hitbox is clipping, and it makes it think that it's not a valid placement location when it was just there 2 seconds ago. And so you have these inconsistencies throughout the game that are really frustrating where like base parts work one way, the world works another. I kind of assumed when I put a giant metal landing pad down that nothing would grow up through it, but I guess I assumed wrong. I went looking online and most people say like there is no solution. Just don't build your base in a forest. I was like, all right, well, fair enough.
Fair enough.
Build it on a mountainside, or some people will build it vertically. Like they'll just get it up off the ground to the point where the shrubs, they'll avoid trees, but things like shrubs and bushes and stuff that's only about as half as tall as the player, they won't grow up through it because they've put the thing like 6 feet above the ground and they just build a ramp. And I mean, and that can look kind of sci-fi and cool and whatever. But yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that it works in that way. But the game is always undergoing development, and it feels like whenever they bring out a new update that they do listen to the community, put in what's asked for. I feel like they add more features versus fixing bugs. So hopefully they'll fix a few more bugs in the future. But it's still a very, very fun game. It's very pretty. Exploring planets is addictive. Like I will very easily spend 2 hours just flying around to different planets, discovering new minerals and animals and seeing just what's down there. Like, is this going to be a cool planet to build on? Like I saw a 3 meter tall dinosaur the other day and I was like, whoa. It's not really a dinosaur because it's got a whole bunch of different features, but like it was really cool to kind of stumble upon this kind of stuff in different environments. And it's fun with the chat room too, because like all of you collectively are just like watching this video game randomly generate flora and fauna in front of you. And all of you look at something like a half anteater, half mole, half turtle and go, what on God's green earth is that? And the chat goes, you're not on God's green earth, Joel. You're on, Timbuktu 7 or whatever the name of the planet is. They're always really hard to pronounce. So it's been really fun in that way. It's a very lean back experience, and I'm still very much enjoying it. But the bugs, I'm new to playing a video game that's like in development like this. Like Minecraft has got bugs, but the whole of the experience is pretty solid.
Right.
Whereas this, there seems to be some very obvious bugs in some of the core mechanics of No Man's Sky, and that to me is a little bit off-putting. But I'm hoping that they fix things up soon. And again, the little nitpicks don't outweigh the overall experience. And to on that note, I feel that that's kind of a good way to lead into the main discussion this week, which is going to be the Dragon Prince Season 3. And you're like, Joel, wait, you just talked about that last week. Well, this time I've seen the whole thing, and I can feel more confident in laying down some review notes on it. And Stephen has also seen the whole thing and watched, I think, seasons 1 and 2 more recently than I have as well, which is going to be handy. I think that note of I liked it on a whole, but had a lot of really weird nitpicks with it, and it doesn't dismiss the experience. I'm not saying I didn't like season 3, but I'm saying it was the weakest out of all of the seasons that I've watched so far. And that seems to be the exact opposite of a lot of other people out there. I did.
Yeah, and
sorry, go ahead.
And I'm actually sort of along the lines of, I guess, who would amicably disagree with some of your points. So we'll get into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is the thing. I might be being too picky. I don't know whether I'm just in the right or wrong mood. I remember having some of these issues with the other seasons, but I think the underlying structure of the other seasons and the pace that they were moving at allowed me to forgive these. Whereas here, I was less satisfied with the season 3 plot and pacing. And so because I wasn't as satisfied with that, all these little things that started to bug me started to really bug me because I didn't have anything else that washed them away. Right. Like I personally didn't have anything to kind of glom onto. I did find an article by Swara Ahmed on But Why Though, which is a website. We'll have the link in the show notes. And they kind of summed up how I felt. And it was essentially like the pace at which the season wraps up is so fast compared to the first 2 seasons and even the good part of the first part of the third season that it just feels like it hasn't been earned. And while I'm happy with the results, like where we ended, where we started, the character arcs and all that kind of stuff, I like where we landed. I'm not
Yes.
always convinced that we earned it along the way. Whether it's a character arc, whether it's a major plot change, whether it's, a big event, all that kind of stuff. I kind of felt like that all got piled into the last two episodes. Even the last episode felt like it should have been an hour, not 20 minutes or
Yeah,
30 minutes.
and I agree with you on that point. I felt that we enjoyed the ending. We thought that it wrapped up in a really, really pretty interesting way. But I feel like it's funny. I did a bit of homework before coming on today or this evening because I went back and listened to your previous three.
Oh yeah, the
um,
other two shows, yeah.
yeah, and so one of them you were talking about. Oh yeah, it was when you were talking about season two. You said I thought that season one was 13 episodes and this one's only 9. But it's interesting because they've only been 9 episodes each. But the pacing in this one feels like I didn't mind actually it taking its time. I enjoyed a lot of them sort of getting to where they wanted to go. But this could have easily taken the last 2 episodes and stretched them out to 13, and it felt like it would have been more of a comfortable
Yeah,
number of episodes, I
and
guess.
I could even suggest that they could edit out some parts of the earlier episodes 1 and 2, and maybe like 4 a little bit, and kind of tighten things up, and still have the same 9 episodes, but have more important things happening uh, at a different pace. Taking some of the content of like episodes 7, 8, 9 and spreading it out a little bit so that you have time to digest how this character is feeling rather than stuff coming out of left field. And I can feel you and I kind of dancing around stuff. So I'll say right now that spoilers are going to happen. So we
All right.
we we will get into all the details of what happened, what we liked, what we didn't like. So if you haven't seen Dragon Prince season 3, now might be a good opportunity to maybe check out. And I mean, they're only 9 episodes, 20 minutes apiece, 25 minutes apiece. So like it's not a hard thing to catch up on. And I will say now, it is a good show. You should watch it. It's
Yes.
the things that I have to pick it apart are just that. They're things that grate on me, but maybe not grate on you, depending on how you approach the show. But yeah,
I think that's a good disclaimer as well, because the last time I was on, we were chatting about Three Below,
right.
and I think we just completely piled on this show where we were just nitpicking everything to death, and
Mm-hmm.
it was at the end we went, oh, but we liked it.
Yeah.
It was good. We were just it's easy to pick apart things I find that you like,
Yes.
and it feels like it's almost there, and if you had just done these things,
Mm-hmm.
then it would have been not just an enjoyable show, but thoroughly enjoyable. So I feel like this falls into the same sort of category as Three Below, and I enjoyed it more than Three Below, I think.
Yeah.
And
Oh yes.
and so yeah, I think that disclaimer that we enjoyed this. Now we just are going to pick apart parts of
Yeah.
it.
I mean, to focus on what I liked, I really enjoyed the world building, the fact that we've been traveling for 2 episodes to get the kids to Zadia to return the Dragon Prince to its rightful home, and we finally get to see Zadia in this season, and it's beautiful. Like
Yes.
visually, the show is really amping it up. Like I'm excited that there's an art book coming in 2020 because I really want to take a look
Oh,
under the hood. Yeah,
good.
July
Nice.
2020, I think.
Very
So
nice.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And it's big. It's like 180 pages. Like that's a big book. So I'm really looking forward to checking that out because I find that kind of stuff is one of the aspects of the show that pushed me to forgive the things that I don't like so much. Is that it's so easy to watch as an artist. Like there's just so much visually to take in. Crazy creatures that are like
Oh, those are some of my
beautiful
favorite
or
things.
aggressive or just like ethereal or whatever. They've just got so many different aspects of a combination of like culture, zoology, and like all kinds of things that just kind of go into it. Um, I also feel like I really liked the specifically Ghost episode 3. And for those that don't remember, that's when Rayla discovers that she's been magically banished from her home glade because it is thought that she abandoned her mission to assassinate King Harrow, I think is his name. Um, and
I believe that. Yeah.
yeah, and so it is Harrow, yeah, and because the Moon Shadow elves that sent her don't know the conditions under which she abandoned the mission. She's doing the right thing, but they don't know what that thing is. To them, it just looks like she's abandoned, and so she's been banished from it. And it's a really neat way to handle being banished. It's not just somebody at the gate saying you can't come in.
No, we thought it was incredibly clever as well. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean
very well done.
they magically can't see her. She can see them, but in a form of almost torture. They're faceless and they can't hear her. They can only see her in reflections, and even that is an added form of torture where she knows they can see her and they can't communicate. And so all you see is this communication of a look of pain between her and a family friend. And like it was really poignant, and it really helped shape, I think, the arc for Rayla for the season.
Hmm.
Because
Definitely.
yeah, because her parents were part of the Dragon Guard that quote unquote abandoned their post, or so we thought for the whole season. Even though it turns out that they were murdered. But it's a thing that weighs on her because her parents were frowned upon, like they were shunned, and she had to try to disprove this family dishonor, of having her parents also banished, and now she's banished just like her parents. So like it really strikes a chord with her, and it causes her mood to shift for like episodes 3, I would say 4 and 5, I want to say all the way through, because in the desert later on, Callum is trying to console her, and she ends up kind of blowing up at him. Like she kind of lashes out because he's just trying to be nice, but she's like, "You don't understand how like much
Yeah.
this is really bothering me," sort of thing. And
Yeah. The
especially,
stakes that she was up against through the
yeah,
whole thing.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think out of all the characters, I really enjoyed Rayla the most this
Hmm.
season. She would be my top. And I say that I think I've always liked Rayla quite a bit, but I feel like she was the more subtle uh she was the more subtle storyline. It didn't smack you over the head. Whereas I feel like other storyline aspects, for different characters, they really kind of like wrote it down on the bat and then hit you in the back of the head with it. Like, this is going to happen next. Are you sure you heard us? So that kind of stuff I found a little bit problematic. Overall, my season 3 dislikes. I found some of the comedic moments, not all, but some, really pulled me out of it. They just felt kind of modern jokes. Like it's like when you put a joke about modern technology or modern slang or a meme into a period piece. Like it really doesn't translate. And so I didn't find some of the humor very well received.
Mm.
Or it was things like, we did mention this last week, where in episode 2 there's a moment where Callum and Rayla are googling over these little fuzzy creatures. I don't remember what they're called, meadow somethings. Um, they're little burrs that
Adorabers.
adore burrs, exactly. So even the name is kind of on the nose, right? And so they're googling over these things, but it's intercut with this very serious scene of Ezrin back in um, Cathalis, assuming the throne and having to make some heavy decisions morally, consciously, all that kind of stuff. And I felt like the cut back and forth, like the zigzag cut, was off-putting to me.
Mm.
Whereas the content is fine. It's more like, I just want you to finish all the seriousness that's happening with Ezra, and then go to Callum and Rayla, and we have a silly moment to kind of like ease the tension. And I get that, but
Gotcha.
they kind of inserted this cut between two throne room scenes, and it just felt very like, what, why are we talking about fuzzy stuff? I was just trying to figure out what Ezrin is going to do next, and then we get this weird fluffy thing, and it's really over the top, but it's fine. It's just that it was in a weird place for me.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so I mean, that kind of stuff I didn't feel well received. And the Claudia is a fun character, but they really focused on her silly side this season, when there's a lot of very heavy things going on around her, and it just felt like she's smarter than that. Like she should be more upset with all of the events involving Vera and her father, her brother's dilemma of who to be loyal to. Every time she's on camera, and it's exaggeration, but every time I felt she was on camera, she's like making a goofy face, or just doing weird stuff. It's like, but she's this crazy, powerful dark mage. Like, shouldn't we Shouldn't she be more involved somehow in the
But
story?
she's sort of been that way since the first season. Like they
Oh,
had, yeah. It's. I feel like she's been true to the way she's been since the very beginning.
I like the goofiness. I think the difference is and that in season 1 and season 2 we get to see the other sides. We didn't get to see that other side in season 3.
Fair enough.
You know, like does she cast any spells that we see?
Oh yeah, she basically takes over the staff of, for lack of a better way to explain it, the staff of darkness after they visit the Sunfire elves,
Right.
and she's the one who casts the spell of not a hallucination, an illusion, basically, of her father at the
Oh,
end.
right.
Yeah, so she actually takes over that staff once um, when her father, I guess, goes on the attack with the which we haven't talked about yet, but with the beefed up army.
Right. Yeah. So, but she's that's the only thing that she does all season, and it's not. It's magical and cool, but it's not dark. Like she's not sapping the life out of something, and she's not. You know what I mean? Like there was more of a buildup of
Yeah,
what she does, and it's and there's not a lot of dialogue around it either. So there's no character building. It's just something that we already know she can do. So
yeah.
again,
I
like
think
it's one of those things that if they spread more of that out throughout the season, it would have been she would have been a meatier story, I think.
yeah. I actually sort of it's that fine with me though. Just I felt like Soren broke his back in
Hmm.
the end of last season, which, I mean, this will sound morbid, which I loved because there's so many cartoons we watch where people fall out of trees or drop off a mountain and they get up and groan a tiny bit and then they start running away from whatever the bad guy is.
Hmm.
We used to watch How to Train Your Dragon, the series on TV and or Netflix, and the number of times that they would have died
Yeah.
per episode. So the fact that he got hit by a dragon's tail into a rock and was paralyzed was realistic for a cartoon.
Hmm.
And so at the end of last season, she basically sacrifices the baby deer in order to give her brother
Right.
the his ability to walk back. And they sort of talked about it a little bit, and then I think, if I remember correctly, maybe it was a different season I was watching at the time, but she sort of has that white hair now
Yep.
because she basically almost sacrificed part of herself through that spell to bring it back, and she sort of tucked it behind her ear. So I guess the way that I was looking at it, it was more that she was, I don't know, maybe she wasn't keen to start doing huge stuff again because of the toll that the previous one took on her.
Right. But
But and go
but
ahead.
that to me is something that if it's true and I follow that logic, they didn't communicate to you in the season. Right.
Yeah.
You didn't hear that wavering commitment to what she wants to do from her at all because everything she happens to say was goofy. And again, the goofy is fine, and like you said, it's been consistent through seasons 1 and 2, which I like about her. But there wasn't a like seasons one, unlike seasons 1 and 2, which presented a balance for Claudia. I don't think they presented a balance in season 3.
Right.
I,
Actually, they shifted that more to Soren, I guess,
yes, no, that's
because he was sort of flat in the first two seasons, and in this one, it was almost like, I guess maybe it was they had her take the back seat instead of him, so it was more of
yeah.
a growth episode or season for
Season
Soren instead.
100%. And again, that's another positive for me was how they wrote Soren, how they changed his attitude.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit strange that he is, I mean, generally the dumb lug of a brother, sees that his father is the villain, and not doing what's right for everybody, and decides to disobey. And as a sworn Kingsguard, I think is his title, he sticks with Ezrin and decides to leave his family, father and sister, father who he doesn't have necessarily a lot of love for, but is always yearned for respect from. Oops, sorry, bang my mic. Um, and he, uh, so like he doesn't have so much loyalty to his dad as he does to his sister. So leaving Claudia, I felt was more of a harder choice to make for Soren.
For sure. I think it's for me. I think for Soren, it sort of started in season 2, although he doesn't really talk about it, when his father sends him basically on the mission to quote unquote take care of the princes,
Right.
and if an accident happens, it happens. So basically saying, go take care of them and kill them and get rid of them so that he can be the king and no one will question it. And so that doesn't go according to plan. And then in season 3, it sort of starts off with them talking to their father about it, and Claudia says he could have died, and his father basically says, I don't care. That's not the important thing. What should have been the important thing is ensuring that the princess didn't come back. So he didn't use those exact words, but basically he did say something to the effect that that doesn't matter, or that's not important regarding Soren's ability to walk or him not dying, kind of thing. So I think that's when he sort of just switched his tune and then just sort of paid attention to his father a little bit closer. And Claudia, I feel like she just, the same way that Soren didn't want to really admit that his father was evil in season 2, Claudia, I don't think, is really ready to see that he's evil either. And I think it's partially because they both do black magic, so they've got that, if her father's evil, does that make her evil, kind of thing?
Right.
Or maybe I'm reading into it too much, but
Well, again, I think it's great through logic, and it makes sense hearing you say it, but I didn't get it from the show, right? Like I think it's one of those things where it should have been in there. I think it's a great idea to have her be more conflicted about what she can do and how it's the same as what her father does, and does that make her like her dad? Those are the kind of things that Claudia, who is an intelligent character, who we know would think like that. But throughout the season, her arc is basically just blind loyalty, which is not, it doesn't speak to her intelligence, which is too bad because I really like her as a character and think more of her. And in the same light, and this goes back to the speed at which they start to pace out the last 2 episodes. Soren has a speech in the second to last episode where he talks about his dad is the bad guy, he's the villain, I'm doing what's right, I've learned my lesson, and I'm moving on. And it's, for once, not spelled out, but it doesn't sound like Soren at all. It sounds like someone else wrote it, because he's the guy that can't pronounce the name of the kingdom that is next door to them, right? Like they play him off as so dumb for so long, and then the emotional growth is a steady curve this season, but the intellectual growth is like a coin flip. It's just like all of a sudden he can speak in like adult language in full sentences. Yeah. It's like, what? Okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm happy for it. I like where we land with Soren, but it's just like, you didn't earn that.
Interesting.
For me, another kind of, we'll say, hang up was some of the dialogue. Some of the clunky dialogue. And I really wish that they would realize that they've got a more mature audience. Like, we're talking about a show that presents multicultural characters that have different partner preferences, whether it's, lesbian couples or gay or whatever. And it's all presented as a baseline normal, which I love about the show.
Yeah.
And
magnificent.
And they don't beat you over the head with it. It's just how it is. Including the relationship with Callum and Rayla. So it's human elf, and we've never seen that in the show. We've seen elf, and we've seen human and all that kind of stuff, but never like a human elf combo. And so there's all kinds of questions that brings up, and it's awesome. And I like, again, that they added that in there. But
yeah, I like that there's questions about it for, like, I think you alluded to it in the previous podcast, but it may bring up questions for us in terms of what that could mean, but on the show, they're not addressing it at all, as in there are no questions. It just, it is the norm.
Yeah, exactly. And what I find so unbalanced about it is that you have this subtle lead up. There's all these awkward moments where, like, they're comforting one another, and then she's thinking about, like, I think, does Callum kiss her first? I can't remember who kisses him.
No, she kissed him first, and he in the desert sort of protected area.
And so he's like, "Oh, that wasn't what I was going for." And so there's this awkward teenage moment. Like, it's brilliant. It's really well done, because she's so high strung, and she thinks that he's professing love, and he's not, and he's just trying to comfort her and be a friend because he doesn't think she feels like that. And then he does find out she does, and it's really, really well done. But then in the next episode, when they're on the back of the sand strider or whatever it is, and the villain, or not the villain, she's not really a villain, she's a heel character, I guess. What's the kind of elf that flies? The wind strider? Wind something? Wind.
Yeah, Wind Strider, I think. But Yeah, she was an incredibly cool character, and it unfortunately just sort of felt like a
It
throwaway.
does, yeah. It feels like a throwaway. I got a feeling it's not the last we're going to see of her. I feel like that character's probably going to be back. There's just too much effort into her character, her design, her personality. Like
Yeah,
I feel like that's a season 4 if they do it. Um, callback, kind of like how oh gosh, I can't remember the character from Firefly, but there's like a crook character in Firefly that comes back, and it's always it's like this bad penny that won't go away, sort of
yeah,
thing. It's like Q in Star Trek, you know, like it's
yeah,
like they're a beloved
exactly.
character, but they're not in all the time. There's like one episode or 2 episodes a season, that sort of thing. Um, and so with this a character, and I feel bad, I don't remember her name, but um, she,
Six or
yeah,
six or something.
asking like, hey, Nyx maybe NYX,
Nyx, yeah,
yeah.
right.
So she's asking like, oh, hey, even though I betrayed you and was an evil person, which you know she's going to do from the get go, you decided to forgive me. Why is that? And then Callum goes into this after school special speech about what a hero is and the fact that Rayla is a hero. And again, I don't mind that he's paying this huge compliment to Rayla. It's the dialogue and how it's written and how he does it. It really just pulls me out of like this fantasy world where everybody there knows what a hero is, and so does all the audience. This is not the first cartoon that's had heroes.
Right.
And then he takes the time to give you a dictionary definition of what a hero is, and then they end up kissing and being together from that point on. And again, I like the result, but I thought that the very clunky way of delivering it was not great. It moved into a really cool moment where she has to tell him to shut up, and then she grabs him by the collar, and she's more the alpha person in the
Yeah,
relationship, which is fun. Um, the article that I mentioned earlier mentioned that it's really nice to see that Rayla is the hero going on an emotional journey in this season, and Callum, the male love interest, is the support. Like it's a flip of the
right.
what you'd normally see in a cartoon. You know, is you normally you'd see the dude hero with a girlfriend that would be supporting him, right? And so they've turned it around where Rayla is she's the more physical character. She's the swords and fighting person. Like he's the sorcery and the emotional guy, as opposed to the stereotypical um, opposite way that they normally pair men and women in cartoons. And so it's all great, but there's just the weird clunky dialogue for me was not my favorite. There's another one like that later on when Soren apologizes to Callum for bullying him back in like season 1.
Right.
And then again, it stops all narrative and all normal character interaction and turns into a after school special about like, I'm very sorry that I bullied you. It was wrong. I had internal, trouble with my father and feelings towards him, and it came out in violence towards you, and that was wrong. And it's like, oh my God, really? Like, could you not? I like that kind of stuff should be in there. It absolutely should be in there, but it should be in there in the way that the characters speak to each other and how they've spoken to one another for the last 2 seasons, right?
Or while they're doing an activity, so it's not let's just stop on the stairs on the side of a
Yes.
hill and have this chat.
Yeah. While an army is forming and attacking you from below. Like, just.
Yeah, I don't think I would have minded the dialogue. Like, I hadn't. I guess the way that I watched this was with my wife and sons, and so we just sort of, I guess, watched it with a less critical eye and enjoyed it. But the more that we talk about it, the
Right.
more I feel like if they had have been like, we need to lug things up and down these stairs, and if Soren had said everything he was saying, but while they were getting ready,
Hmm.
in a broken up way, like, geez, I guess we could have, or I guess I could have, or I was dealing with father issues and hadn't really thought about that before. But if it was sort of broken up and paced throughout the activity, as opposed to, as you said, let's stand on the side of this mountain and have an after school special moment,
Hmm.
then it would have been probably less hit you over the headish.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, it feels like, oh, stop. We have to get this point across. So stop everything and make sure everybody knows that Soren is
Yeah,
sorry. And same thing with, this whole like, we've been there for 2 seasons. We know why Callum is in love with Rayla. Like, we get it. We totally understand why. Because you see that crush that he has on Claudia sort of shift over two
yeah,
seasons to Rayla, right?
And that was done fairly subtly. That was quite good.
Yes, and that's the thing is that they've underwritten a lot of the very subtle pacing that they've started in seasons 1 and season 2, and they've kind of just like rushed through season 3, and I don't quite know why. I feel like I've been on a bit of a tear. So like, what for you, especially where you've got you're watching it as a family. Were there any things that stood out to you guys as like favorite moments, like any particular jokes that landed really
The
well?
well, the I think absolute favorite moment was the Avatar nod, the Last Airbender.
So
When
I think I missed this. So fill me in.
okay, so there was the when they were in the desert with Nyx on the Strider. I think it was the second episode where they actually caught back up to her. She left her staff behind because she flew off and she said basically whatever you do, don't touch my staff or something like that. Then Callum goes and he looks at it and he says, "This looks strangely familiar." And he takes off a piece of it that's got this curve to it. And he goes, "Boomerang?" It has nothing to do with anything in the show, but Sokka, in who the actor plays in Avatar: The Last Airbender, had his boomerang with him in the entire show. It was a constant gag. Like even when he lost it one time in the Avatar, it came. He found it again. He goes, "Boomerang, you do always come back." So the fact that he just picked up this thing, you know, Sokka in this as Callum picked up this thing that had this curve to it, and he goes, "Boomerang." It had nothing to do with the show. We had a little moment where we all laughed and cheered and had to watch it 3 times because we
Uh,
loved the Avatar, and it was just like it was a really kind of little. If you saw this, you'll like this moment in here. So
so
we liked that.
it's been too long since I've seen Avatar at the Last Airbender. I didn't pick up. I remember the scene, but I didn't pick up on the fact, nor do I remember that Jack Dacina voiced both Callum and
Oh yeah.
Sokka. I mean,
If you pop on an episode of Avatar right away, you'll go, "Oh my goodness, it's so
oh,
weird hearing them." And like his voice hasn't aged at all.
I remember.
He
I
sounds
remember.
exactly the
Yeah,
same.
I remember seeing it, knowing it when we talked about season 1 on the show. But I like again, I've forgotten since, and I was so wrapped up in all of the magical stuff and trying to get to know this Nyx character. Like what am I looking for? Like what dragon prince secret is hidden within these boomerangs? Like why are they important?
No,
Not that it was a gag towards Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's
I mean
awesome.
it may come back, but when we saw it, we like I said, we cheered in our minds. It was a 100% nod back to Sokka.
It would be cool if they did that again, and if there was a season 4 and Nyx is in it, and there's some other subtle interaction between Callum and the boomerangs where he's just kind of like, "Those are really cool," and
Yeah,
nothing more. Like he never actually gets to touch them. He's just like, "Huh, I like those." Like
yeah,
there could
and
be some nod.
Sokka. It would be pretty cool if Callum actually found a black metal sword in this show as well, because one of the things that always sort of bugged me slightly about Avatar is that Sokka had this sword that he made from meteor metal, and he becomes a fairly skilled swordsman and has this sword that nobody else on the planet has because it was created from a meteor that crashed. And so, but he lost it in I think it was the second to the last episode or last episode, and then it never comes back. It doesn't even show up in Correlator, or as far as I know, none of the graphic novels, and we have a lot of those. And it was one of those things where there's a lot of emphasis placed on that. Where I was surprised they let it basically literally drop away off one of the airships, and we never saw it again.
Mm,
So it would be kind of neat if Callum gets a black metal sword in this, that'd be pretty cool. Not as well.
nice. I could see that.
Yeah.
I can see them doing that. The Sunfire elves have a lot of black and orange and gold going
Mm,
on with their
true.
thing. So that could be a fun thing there. And they're on their side. Like that's one of the big shifts in the final battle and the final closeout of the season, where Viren, who has been going on this snaky trail to get to be king and like muster all of the humans to come and attack the pinnacle of the dragons in Zadia. The Sunfire elves, who have been defeated by Viren, and I guess Erebos, which is
Erebos, that's his
the
name.
little
Yeah.
buggy. He starts off as a little bug that speaks to Viren in his ear, becomes a much larger kind of like serpent thing. He's very
Yeah.
disturbing, actually. There's one thing that I
Yeah.
really quite like about the way that they're handling this spiritual cross-dimensional being that is talking to Viren,
and manipulating him.
Yeah, Viren gets to see him. Like other characters in the show don't get to see this kind of like ghostly apparition floating around, but we as viewers get to see it, and they do it in a very clever way. And it's gross too. Like the bug weaves something over his eye, and like
Yeah.
it's really creepy. It has the dark magic stuff all over it. But anyway, they end up attacking the Sunwell, and this Erebos guy pulls out the magic out of their. It's not the Sunwell. That's a World of Warcraft thing. It's the Sun Forge in
Hmm.
in in Dragon Prince, and so he drains it and gets more powerful, and then kills the Sunfire Elf Queen, which then
Yeah.
pushes all the Sunfire Elves to rally against Viren. And when they find out that Callum and Ezra and all of our heroes are fighting and defending the Dragon Prince, they come to their aid. And so it's this cool battle on the last episode where you've got a lot of Sunfire Elves and really cool kind of like shield magic, and like there's all kinds of stuff that they do with it that's really cool. Um,
Yeah. Actually, in the fight with I forget what her name is, and I feel bad. It was the not the queen, not the Sunfire Queen, but the Sunfire Queen's sister.
yes.
There was a fight between her and Prince Kasef, and after he had been changed into the evil, basically like fire orc kind of creature,
Hmm.
the hand-to-hand combat fight between the two of them was amazing. And so he was basically magically created to be strong and stronger than her. It bugs me sometimes that they always make the male characters automatically stronger, but this guy was pretty huge compared to her, so I sort of get it. But there was one part where he hit her, she hit him back and forth, and then she managed to get a hold of him and then punched him in the face with her free hand. And then it was like, and they changed the camera angle to show you from his point of view, and then she just went bang, and then it was bang, 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 like repeatedly over and over again, and it just sort of escalated into the showed how powerful she was, which I thought was cool. But then I didn't like it how out of the blue he was able to then stop her and then overpower her. And then so she was, again, it's the typical thing, man overpowers the woman, and then he was going to basically be able to win, but then he gets shot off screen by 3 arrows. And then
Right.
as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, so there's a guy on a horse that probably shot 3 arrows
Hmm.
and saved the woman from the man. But it turns out it was actually the little flip. It was actually the young queen, I believe,
Yes.
whose mothers were killed in season 1.
Yes.
And so that I thought was cool. So it wasn't necessarily, this clearly strong woman who then suddenly gets overpowered by a man, gets saved by a man. It was a nice flip that
So
in that sense.
yeah, and I caught the same thing, but what was interesting is that I wasn't really reading it as the man-woman flip. The last battle for me smacked of other media, of other
Oh yeah.
storytelling, and but not in a way that it's just a nod. Like there are shot for shot some things that happen in the final battle that is a clear, um, not even a call out. It's like a clear, I want to say copy of like the Lord of the Rings in the Battle of Helm's Deep and Pelennor Fields. Uh, it's funny that you called them like this big orcish transition for the humans that have been magically transformed by Viren into like basically big sun orcish characters.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where Prince, what's his name? The guy that you were just talking about,
Oh, I had it up there. It was Kellis, not Kellis. Kasef.
Kasef. He stands up on a rock and he raises up his weapon or his hand and he screams and he roars. And it's the exact same thing that happens in the Battle of Helm's Deep. One of the Uruk-hai gets up on a rock and says, basically yells forward in whatever Orcish tongue he's using, and all the bad guys march by. And it's the first time you get to see like all of the how many people are approaching Helm's Deep,
Mm-hmm.
being flanked by cavalry to win the day and save the day. Happened in Helm's Deep, happened in the Battle of Pelennor, Fields of Pelennor in Return of the King. It happened in the Dragon Prince. Like it's character flies off to get help, comes back with help at the last minute to save the day. Like I understand that there's only so many different ways that you can do that, but it really felt like I was watching Lord of the Rings and World of Warcraft kind of happen at the same time. And I
Yeah.
understand that all of the people that are writing and creating the show are probably heavily influenced by those things, especially in the last, 10 to 15 years, or I guess 20 in the case of Lord of the Rings, with those movies are 20 years old, which is crazy. Um,
Jeez.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where it's like, could you nod to it instead of having like the exact same shot? It
Mm.
felt really kind of like on the nose. And what bothered me about, is it Sarai? Is that the sun general that we're talking about?
The
So
sun.
the girl that fights Kasif, the sunfire elf that fights Kasif, where you get to see how powerful he is.
Oh,
Is that Sarai? I'm not really sure. I'm looking at
I keep
IMDb to
forgetting.
try
Yeah.
and grab names. The thing is, like, some of the plots points in season 3 they hammer you over the head with, and then other things like character names they barely call them out once, and then you have to try to figure out who everybody is
Exactly.
later, which I find very frustrating. Anyway, that fight scene where they're in close and there's all this struggle, if you've seen Justice League, it's the fight between Superman and Wonder Woman when they resurrect Superman, like down to the headbutts. It's the same.
Oh, really?
It is the same, and it is like you didn't even really try to change the camera angles. It's like, come on. Anyway, I that to me were the things that where, for the most part, I'm like in it and loving it. Like the Sunfire Elves do some really cool thing where they connect all their shields magically, and then they move forward as a shield wall, and then they bang them down, and this energy field goes out. Like, it's all this cool, imaginative stuff that's you've seen sort of like that kind of stuff before in movies that have, like, Roman centurions and that kind of thing, like Gladiator. But this
Yeah.
is
The shield thing was actually a little bit like, for me, the Black Panther,
yes, yeah, it's very much like
when they
Black
when they, when
Panther.
they all lined up in, and not Black Panther, but when they all lined up with the shields in the
Infinity War. Yeah.
Infinity War.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when the forces attack, the aliens are trying to attack. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the same thing. But it was the same thing that was how they would have to do it. But they at least gave it a Sunfire Elf spin, right? Like they
Exactly.
gave it
Yeah.
some cool glowy parts and they made it their own. Whereas the other scenes would just pull me right out of it. It's like, oh my god, this is Lord of the Rings, and it's like, well, then I'm not thinking about the Dragon Prince and the drama on screen. I'm thinking about, like, well, why is this? Why did you guys make
Mm.
like the lowest amount of effort possible to even hide the fact that you were just using these scenes and this blueprint for the fight? So it was a little bit different. I did like the reveal that you mentioned earlier here in the podcast that Viren on the battlefield was an illusion. That
Yes.
that he with through the chaos, he had left to go try to one-on-one Rayla and the Dragon Queen and basically kill them and save the day. Or not save the day, but win his day, achieve his goal of
Yeah.
capturing the power from Zim. What what I don't really understand, and this is the kind of thing, like, they put real stakes in the Dragon Prince, like people can die, like you said, people can break their back. But then Viren has every opportunity to kill Rayla, and the only reason that she survived is because the script says so. And I'm glad that she survived. Again, I'm glad that's where we landed. But the fact that he freezes her and then leaves her, it just, to me, it felt backwards. Like, it just didn't feel.
Um, I guess so. I thought it actually mirrored his original fight with his parents,
Well, and it does. I
where
mean,
he basically froze them, got what he wanted, and then unfroze them. And then, so Callum was saying that,
but he didn't
you
unfreeze
know,
them. He killed them.
no, they fought. He said that they fought and died, like, fighting valiant. He worded it something like that, where the oh, I forget. Maybe.
I know what you mean, but they didn't show it. Like, he ends up killing them, and it just, it to me, they echoed it for that point of having Rayla go through the same fate as her parents. But
Yes.
the fact that, I don't know, like I said, Viren to me is a very soapy villain. Like, he's not. There's nothing about him that really makes you like he's just. I mean, I like the fact that he's human greed and self-interest personified. Like, I like
Yes.
that. That makes him complicated. That makes him dangerous because he's like Thanos. It's like he truly believes what he's doing is right. It's just that it's terrible. And so that, in a way, makes him interesting. But nothing they do with him makes him fearful or not fearful or feared. Like I'm not scared of Viren. He's just he fights the last battle in pajamas. Like he's he's not formidable at all. They don't even make it a purple robe. Like it is a white undershirt. Like it really just feels like all these missed opportunities. Now, reversely, I think that Erebos, this serpent thing around his neck, is terrifying. Like he definitely a villain from the get-go, but a smart villain. Someone that
I think
has
he's
not
going to
let his
come
plans
into
known, you know?
yeah, exactly, and I think he's going to come into play later on. Like they're going to probably do the similar style to as in Avatar, where they're talking about the different elements. And there's book 1, book 2, and so season 3 was book 3, and each one sort of has the title of, if I recall correctly, a title of an element, or it usually has to do. I think there's going to be 6 books based on the fact that they're the 6 elements that they're talking about.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And so I think you mentioned that if they have a season 4, and I feel like it's trending well enough and well enough received that I think they're going to do what they did with Avatar and just have a series of books and then have one story that is planned and will be completed after the 6 books. Or at least that's what I hope they do. That's one of my favorite things about Avatar, is that it was a planned story with 3 seasons, 3 different types of bending with an end planned, and that was it. Not this season after season after season trying to make up new stories.
Well, one of the main creators on Dragon Prince is one of the showrunners from Avatar: The Last Airbender, right?
Exactly. So I hope they sort of
book 1 is Moon, book 2 is Sky, book 3 was Sun, which makes sense considering the focus on the Sunfire elves.
Yeah.
Weird that book 2 was Sky, considering there's a lot of Sky stuff happening in Zadia as well. I think this season was the first time we got to see the Sky something elves. I can't remember their names. It's
too many names.
No, well, it's and this is the thing where you think, like, the world itself is so wonderfully unique in terms of how the elves look, how they talk, the cultures, the names, and how they're focused as magical beings is also unique. And that's one of the reasons why I find that the end fight scene was so run of the mill. It's like, you guys have created this incredibly unique show, and you're giving us the same fight we've seen 100 times in every fantasy movie over the last 10 years. Like, why? I wish there was a little bit more to it. I like that Ezra came back with the dragons and stuff like that, and it's something that's nice about the CG that I know I talked about last week on the show, and I remember talking about I'm on the fence about it in season 1, something that we just wouldn't be able to see if this was a classically drawn show, is these big battle scenes with like 100 characters. It wouldn't be possible. We'd be waiting years for the season to be finished in terms of production. It's not one dragon, it's like 7 that all come in. Like, you can't do that. I say not that you can't. You can. It would just be very expensive and take a very long time. But overall, like, I like that we've got this cliffhanger with Erebos being spun into. He gets some of the power from Zim. They almost kill Zim. They almost steal his power. Erebos has got some mystical plan for this power. We don't quite know what it is yet, but the caterpillar serpent thing has spun itself into a cocoon, which is the last scene, I think, from season 3. And Claudia reveals that to Viren, who's alive, thanks to Claudia. There are some cool moments that happen in the very last few minutes that wrap things up and have things go forward. It wasn't so much a nice little bow. I feel like there was definitely some loss. I don't know.
For her, for sure.
Yeah. And there was
half of her hair is white now.
Yes. There was also the queen, the Sunfire Queen died. And that was dramatic, and that was you felt the pain from her sister. Like so there's some things there that really kind of complicate relationships going forward. Like, that there's going to be a lot of vengeance from the Sun Elves towards this Erebos character, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of revenge and violence, I think, in terms of intentions coming from them. And I can see that maybe getting ahead of themselves, next season if they have to kind of pursue that. So there's some cool story notes that they could go on. I hope with season 4 that they take their time, that they spread character arcs out over the full 9 episodes and not jam them
Mm-hmm.
into the last 2. And I hope that they don't.
Agreed.
I don't need to watch 2 or 3 episodes to get into quote unquote next season. I'm in. I start the season with show 1. Like the season should open with that cocoon opening. Like, just get us right into it. Don't fluff
Yeah.
around. I don't want a video game fight between, Callum and a dragon where they have to figure out the timings of his fire breath just so that you can beat the boss battle. Like, I want something a little bit more deep, because it's not a network television show. You don't have to sell advertising. You don't have to get people in their butts every week and sum up. If people want to catch up on the show or refresh their minds, seasons 1 through 3 are there. They can just watch them. And I'm going to do that. The next time that they come out with a new Dragon Prince, I'm going to make a point to watch the other seasons first so that they're a little bit more fresh in my mind. And
Yes.
so I feel like I can address the new season as more of a through point story, as opposed to, I felt like I was a little bit forgetful when it came to this season. There might have been some subtle things that I missed because it had been almost a year since I'd seen the second season. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. In terms of your household and what you guys are looking forward to, has there been any talk about, like, things that you were happy about with the way that season ended? Any cliffhangers? Or people like really looking forward to the next season?
No, we actually we overall we just enjoyed it, because for us it was a way to sit down and have a show that was, engaging enough for us as parents to watch along with our sons, and then it felt like it was the right age for a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all of the flower jokes and the 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 occasional poop joke and stuff like that. It was kind of hit their mark in terms of
Yeah.
audience for that age kind of thing, and so it was good. And I guess we all sort of, our favorite character, I believe, is essentially Rayla, and just the way that everything that she was dealing with through the season, and the way that she basically sacrificed herself at the end, and then didn't die because Callum was able to kind of push himself past
Mm-hmm.
a magical barrier that he hit before, and so she basically shoves Viren off the mountaintop and or runs at him, and they both fly off the top of a mountain. And so that's how Viren dies, and Claudia brings him back. But then, yeah, either way, I mean, without getting into all kinds of extra detail, it felt like it was well done. I agree with you that things could have been spread out more over the season, but the way I think the show, from what I recall of the first 2 seasons, it does a good job of sort of tidying it up in a bow. But then, like in this season, where it was that extra little scene afterwards with Claudia and her dad and Alvaros.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And so basically it's, here's a tight little bow on it. Oh, but this is happening in the background kind of thing, which
Yeah, it's not necessarily
hints to what's coming.
Yeah, it's not a cliffhanger. It's more of a here's what's coming next. Yeah, like
Exactly.
It's smart. Like it keeps the story moving forward without leaving you wondering, like, what the heck happened to my heroes. Like, they didn't, Rayla didn't jump off the mountain killing Viren and then fade to black, with you not
Exactly.
knowing what happened, right? You get the happy ending sort of thing, but then you also get to see, like, oh, but it's not over yet. It's like they do that with Star Wars stuff, where characters are, everybody survived, but then Kylo Ren got away, or whatever it is still happening out there, and I like that kind of stuff. So very cool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have this week for the Citadel Cafe. If you have enjoyed the show and you'd like to check out some of the links that we have to talk about, you can head on over to thecitadelcafe.com. I'll have links to Big Salty Pond. We'll have links to a few things about the Dragon Prince there as well. You can also email the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com. The music was composed by Kevin MacLeod, as it has always been. And you can also subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, and Spotify. I'm working on getting some shows up on YouTube in the near future, just because I feel like it might be a cool platform for people to maybe listen to shows on. I know it's not a video show, but sometimes discovery is part of the game over on YouTube, so you can look forward to that in 2020. Word of mouth is, of course, the easiest way to support the show. It's totally free. You can just poke a friend in the arm and say, hey, I really like this conversation that Stephen and Joel had about the Dragon Prince. You should check it out. Point them towards the show. Every last little ear hole helps. And if you are so inclined, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we are supported 100% by our listeners. So patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe is where you can go. If you decide that you get some value out of the podcast and you'd like to help us make a few more of these things, then you can head over there. Patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. It's completely up to you. There's multiple tiers. It includes things like bonus episodes, member-only Discord access, and we are currently one more member ahead of where we were last month. We are at 16. So if you'd like to become 17, you know where to go. And we always like to try to get one more patron in before the next month. So we're getting into December, and it's going to be a fast month. Holidays always make the time fly by. So hopefully we can drum up a little bit more support over at Patreon. It's been a good time so far, and the community has grown in the Discord, and it's always cool to see new people chatting, new people finding the podcast, talking about nerdy things like the Dragon Prince and all that kind of fun stuff. It's been a lot of fun, and I couldn't do the show without you, so I really, really appreciate it. If you want to find more about what I'm doing, you can go to joelduggan.com. That includes links to social media. It includes links to other podcasts I do, like the Spawn Chunks, which is about Minecraft, and also links to my Twitch page, which is where I'm currently playing No Man's Sky in Minecraft and hanging out with another cool crew of people there. Check that out at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan. Stephen, thanks so much for being on the show, my friend. This has been...
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Always a good time to talk about animation with you. Please tell the folks where they can go and read Big Salty Pond.
Basically on social media channels, like I said, Instagram and Facebook, it's just at Big Salty Pond or /Big Salty Pond. But it seems to be, it's best presented on Webtoons, and I just sort of created a URL redirect. So it's just webtoon.bigsaltypond.com. And that'll take you right to the comics on Webtoon.
Check it out, folks. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.